What is up, guys? Matthew here, and welcome to the Worst Possible Series 2022. I tried saying that with the same level of enthusiasm that I did when I started the Best Possible Series video, and I did the intro for that last time out, but I simply cannot because, well, it speaks for itself. Today, it is time to explore the evil twin of the Best Possible Series, and that is the Worst Possible Series. Now, if you haven't checked out the Best Possible Series, I stress you do that first because you'll know exactly what we are doing in this video, how it works. But basically, we are going to be picking our most hellish marathon of modern Doctor Who, going through every single episode of the modern era, picking our least favourite opener, our least favourite episode 2, etc., all the way up to our least favourite finale, Christmas special, etc., until we construct our worst possible marathon of modern Doctor Who. It's not easy, it's not good, but we're going to do it anyway. So sit back and enjoy. So, before we get started, let's have a look at what the worst possible series was back in 2020. Good grief. So, our least favourite series opener was New Earth. Our least favourite episode 2 was Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, and they are followed by Orphan 55, Arachnids in the UK, The Saranga Conundrum, The Woman Who Lived, Can You Hear Me, Let's Kill Hitler, Sleep No More, In the Forest of the Night, Fear Her, Hellbent, The Wedding of River Song, and The Return of Dr. Mysterio. So, starting off with our least favourite series opener, we of course currently have New Earth, and like I did in the Best Possible Series, we will be discussing if any of the, Worst Possible Series episodes have changed, been swapped out with some of the newer episodes we've had since, being the 6 in Flux, or if I've just took a distaste to another episode in any of the series prior. So New Earth is our current least favourite series opener, and to be honest, looking at the list, you've got Rose, New Earth, Smith and Jones, Partners in Crime, The 11th Hour, The Impossible Astronaut, Asylum of the Daleks, Deep Breath, The Magician's Apprentice, The Pilot, The One Who Fell to Earth, Spyfall Part 1, and The Halloween Apocalypse. Now, most of these are decent episodes, and I think you've got to be a bit more lenient when it comes to series openers, because they have a job, of course, of introducing a brand new series, a brand new story arc, maybe a brand new Doctor or companion, and I guess the narrative and the story itself takes a backseat of sorts. But New Earth is still going to be my least favourite series opener. As much as I didn't enjoy the Halloween Apocalypse, I thought it was a bit dull, I thought it was a bit boring, and yeah, it had a lot to do, like other series openers. In fact, probably more so than other series openers. It had to set up a load of different things. It brought Dan in as a new companion, but setting up the whole Flux story arc, setting up the story with Carvanista, of course, it was bringing in so many new facets to what was Flux, and this series already had a really tough job, having to build the story arc up, develop it, and then conclude it in what was only 5 episodes' time with the finale, so it was always going to be difficult. But for me, the Halloween Apocalypse got the balance wrong in terms of setting everything up, but also meaning in giving the narrative itself a decent enough chance to be enjoyable, and it just wasn't for me. There was nothing about it that I particularly enjoyed, and like I say, it just spent a bit too much trying to put the right pieces in the right places, and yeah, I wasn't a big fan of this. So, like I mentioned in the Best Possible Series, we are going to, of course, pick our least favourite episode 1, 2, 3 and 4, but we're also going to reference a second place episode, and I think the Halloween Apocalypse is not a close second, but it is second to New Earth, which undoubtedly is the weakest series opener for me. I think the rest of them are all decent enough. Maybe Asylum of the Daleks is a bit poor. The rest, I think, are all decent enough, but New Earth for me, I found really irritating. I thought Cassandra she's an okay villain, I guess, in terms of her idea, but how she was portrayed in this episode was really, really annoying. I love the setting of the hospital, and I love the cat people, and the idea of this deadly disease I think is really good, but I always find it a difficult watch when Cassandra is jumping from the Doctor's body to Rose's body. it just becomes really jarring and really annoying, and I find the episode really tough to watch because of that. Whereas I can sit back and watch pretty much all of the other series openers without an issue, New Earth is the one I would definitely look to avoid because of that. So New Earth is still my least favourite series opener. Episode 2, and our current least favourite, is Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, and in terms of the episode 2s, we have End of the World, Tooth and Claw, The Shakespeare Code, Fires of Pompeii, The Beast Below, Day of the Moon, Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, Into the Dalek, The Witch is Familiar, Smile, The Ghost Monument, Spyfall Part 2, and War of the Centaurans. Now again, these are okay episodes, normally quite light-hearted affairs, as it's the first trip into the past, the future, or an alien planet for said companion. And they're all quite fun episodes. I think The Shakespeare Code's not one of my favourites, but I still think it's watchable enough. You could say the same for The Beast Below, although that does have a pretty heartbreaking twist at the end. Smile is not one I often jump towards, but again, it's okay. I think in terms of my two least favourites, it's between Dinosaurs on a Spaceship and The Ghost Monument. Now, The Ghost Monument, upon a recent rewatch, I found extremely boring. Other than the start, which of course was following the great cliffhanger at the end of The Woman Who Fell to Earth, with the Doctor and the companions being split up ever so briefly, with quite a climactic and eventful entrance and start to the episode. The rest was incredibly dull and incredibly boring, lots of talking, lots of exposition, just such a boring flat tone to the episode, all the way up until the end where the Doctor finally is reunited with the TARDIS. And if it wasn't for that really good start and that really quite emotional ending when we see 13 and her TARDIS for the first time, and I love the scenes between her and her TARDIS, if it wasn't for them, The Ghost Monument would be my least favourite episode too. But for them moments themselves, it is going to be the second weakest, and Dinosaurs on a Spaceship is still going to remain my least favourite episode too. It's an episode I don't remember enjoying at all. It is literally exactly what it says on the tin. All it is dinosaurs on a spaceship. I think David Bradley's character is decent enough and has quite an evil twist to him, which I think the episode desperately needs. But the rest of it is just pretty meh. The characters, the side cast that we bring in aren't really that great. It's one of the few episodes where I find 11 a little bit too on the annoying side as well. So yeah, this episode offers absolutely nothing to me, whereas Ghost Monument at least offers a good start and a pretty good end as well. So Dinosaurs on a Spaceship will remain my least favourite episode 2. Episode 3 now, when we have The Unquiet Dead, School Reunion, Gridlock, Planet of the Ood, Victory of the Daleks, Curse of the Black Spot, A Town Called Mercy, Robot of Sherwood, Under the Lake, Thin Ice, Rosa, Orphan 55, and Once Upon Time. Now, of course, Orphan 55 was the current inhabitant of Episode 3, and there's a couple that could drop in there. Victory of the Daleks is not one of my favourites at all. I don't like the paradigms, firstly, and I think the ending, how they just sort of leave on their own accord, it's not very Dalek. Falling for the 11th Doctor, confronting them with a jammy dodger is just plain stupid. But I like the setting of it, and I think Winston Churchill is a great historical figure. Curse of the Black Spot is another one that I never ever reach for. It's pretty dull and not an episode I like too much. And of course, Orphan 55, the current incumbent of this position, is a very dull episode with a very annoying side cast, and it ends up being all around a sort of preachy, this is what the Earth could be like, and the ending really grinds on me when 13 pretty much ends up just lecturing the audience on how they have to look after the planet. It's a very jarring episode, but Once Upon Time, I have to say from Flux, is one of the most unwatchable and unbearable episodes I've ever seen. I could not follow it. It really irritated me upon rewatching it of late, and it is, well, you can tell it's right in the middle of Flux. It's trying to develop the arc, it's trying to do multiple things. You've got the 13th Doctor here, there, and absolutely everywhere, with numerous different pieces of story and different universes and different variations of different characters, and it is a horrific watch, if I'm brutally honest. And it was at this point which I think Flux lost me. You know, I've said in a recent podcast, I mentioned it briefly in our Best Possible series, but for me, Flux was the worst part about Flux, because the actual episodes themselves, the standalone elements to each episode are actually pretty good. You know, War of the Centaurans I didn't mention in episode 2 in my last point, but it's a fantastic episode, as is Village of the Angels. And I think Survivors of the Flux isn't too bad if you take the Flux out of it, which sadly, you know, doesn't leave much left. But yeah, Once Upon a Time was the point to which it lost me, because it just threw me out of the story, made it very hard to follow, and irritated me to the point to which I just finished myself with this story. I thought, I don't want anything to do with this, because I just don't enjoy it, I don't understand it, and it's pretty much just doing my head in. So, Once Upon a Time is going to replace Orphan 55 as my least favourite episode 3, which I didn't think would happen straight away, but it is, like I say, a jarring, unwatchable, convoluted mess, and will take the place as my least favourite episode 3. Episode 4 now, and we have Aliens of London, The Girl in the Fireplace, Daleks in Manhattan, The Centauran Experiment, Time of Angels, The Doctor's Wife, The Power of Three, Listen, Before the Flood, Knock Knock, Arachnids in the UK, Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, and Village of the Angels. Now, episode 4s are quite difficult, and I mentioned this in my best possible series. A lot of these episodes are the opening part to a 2-part story, and of course, naturally, the opening part of a 2-parter is less eventful and spends more time, a bit like a series opener I suppose, introducing a brand new story, but doesn't quite have the climax, or I guess isn't as eventful as the second part of a 2-parter, because that is the climax. That's ultimately where a lot of the action and a lot of the great things happen. So it's hard to give them too much praise and judge them too much one way or the other, but I currently have Arachnids in the UK, and of course that is not going to be replaced by Village of the Angels. I did stress in the best possible series how much I enjoyed that episode. I do love the Angels. So is Arachnids in the UK going to be replaced by another episode 4? And the answer is no, it's not. Arachnids in the UK remains the weakest. In terms of competition, I think I've got The Power of Three quite close as another weak episode. The rest, though, are all pretty strong, in fairness. I think Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror is a bit average, but Arachnids in the UK, for me, is an episode that just didn't make much sense. I thought the spiders were the best part about it, don't get me wrong, but Jack Robertson's character was just a Trump archetype, and again, a Doctor Who trying to force politics into its writing to the point to which it was a little bit jarring, and the ending made no sense at all. The Doctor's morals towards the spiders just had no logic to it at all. The fact that she would rather lead these, you know, they're not innocent creatures, but it was established they were confused, they were way too big for what they wanted to be, they were just acting upon instinct, there was no menace or malice to what they were doing. She thought the best way of getting rid of them was to trick them, lead them into a very confined space, and let them either starve or suffocate to death, when the apparent bad guy in the episode wanted to shoot the spiders, and especially the big mother spider. He would rather shoot that spider than let her suffocate under her ginormous size and mass, and the 13th Doctor was opposed to this, and this was just Chibnall basically going, in the past the Doctor doesn't like guns, so we'll make the 13th Doctor not like guns, because that's the Doctor, right? You don't even consider the context of the situation here, Chibnall. It's not, you can't just say the Doctor doesn't like guns for the sake of it, when you're in a position where it's actually better to give the creature a mercy killing, which is quicker and far less painful than it is to suffocate and starve the thing. So it made no sense with how the 13th Doctor went about solving this story, and plus, Arachnids in the UK is the title. UK, right? Although we only ever seen the Arachnids in Sheffield. And you can't tell me at the very end when Ryan whips out his, I don't know, DJ rap music or whatever it was, and the vibrations and the sounds, of course, led all the spiders to go into this confined space. You can't tell me that every single spider that was beneath every single hotel that Jack Robertson had across the whole country all got into that confined space in a matter of minutes. It was way too quick, way too convenient, didn't make enough sense for me. And if you're going to call the episode Arachnids in the UK, you have to respect that this threat is at least to the scale of the UK. So I, for one, don't believe all the spiders were defeated in that end, and if you want us to presume they are, then it was a very, very weak way of doing so. They should have just called it Arachnids in the Sheffield or something. So yeah, it's an episode that has a great villain, has a very creepy spiders, and some of the scenes genuinely do make my skin crawl, but the ending made absolutely no sense, and the Doctor's morals were all over the place, and just didn't make sense with the characters. So it is without doubt my least favourite episode 4. Episode 5 now, when we have World War III, Rise of the Cybermen, Evolution of the Daleks, The Poison Sky, Flesh and Stone, The Rebel Flesh, The Angels Take Manhattan, Time Heist, The Girl Who Died, Oxygen, The Saranga Conundrum, Fugitive of the Judoon, and Survivors of the Flux. Now, currently in this position is the Saranga Conundrum, and the question is, will that be beaten by any of the others? And when I say beaten, I don't mean that in a good way. And the answer is no. The Saranga Conundrum is one of the most boring episodes I think I've ever seen. It literally just consists of the Doctor, and once again, another Chibnall trope, way too many side characters in this, to the point to which they are inconsequential to the story, are just walking around a corridor, chatting. There was even a scene where the Doctor stopped and explained some sci-fi stuff to Yaz for about 5 minutes. It then cut to Graham and Ryan talking to a pregnant man about his baby scans for another 5 minutes. It literally is the most unbearable watch ever. It's such a poor episode, and fun fact for you guys, when I recently rewatched the Chibnall era, this was the only episode it was one of 2 episodes, which I'll get to the other one. This was one of the 2 episodes which I could not finish because I was that bored and I just skipped it. So for me, it is an unbelievably unbearable watch, a very, very boring episode. It sort of highlights all the things I don't like about the Chris Chibnall era in one episode, with too much exposition, too much talking, way too flat, not enough action, the pace doesn't pick up at all, and if anyone wants to excuse the fact that the Pating is meant to be the creature or the thing that adds some menace to this episode, you've got to be winding up. Just flipping look at it. So for me, without doubt, the Saranga Conundrum is my least favourite episode 5. If there was any to come close, maybe The Rebel Flesh, as it's not a 2-parter I like very much, and maybe Time Heist. The rest, though, I think are pretty decent. In fact, no, The Girl Who Died is another one that isn't the best, but it's still better than the Saranga Conundrum, which is my least favourite episode 5. Episode 6 now, and we have Dalek, Age of Steel, The Lazarus Experiment, The Doctor's Daughter, The Vampires of Venice, The Almost People, The Bells of St. John, The Caretaker, The Woman Who Lived, Extremis, Demons of the Punjab, Praxeus, and The Vanquishers. Now, currently, I have Praxeus as my least favourite episode 6, and as much as I thought The Vanquishers was a very mixed, convoluted mess of a finale to the Flux series, and I should have mentioned in my previous point with episode 5, Survivors of the Flux wasn't much better either. This was where Flux started to really fall off a cliff for me. It was already struggling after Once Upon a Time, and in both Survivors of the Flux and The Vanquishers, it was desperately trying its hardest to clean things up the best it could, and basically it was trying to clean things up with a dustpan and a brush that had a hole in the middle of it, because every time they tried to clean up the mess, it was so convoluted, it was so messy, it was so all over the place, it just created even more of a mess, and basically gave itself way too much to do in the end. And maybe that's a victim of COVID, maybe it would have been a lot better if it had more episodes in the series, but for me, towards the end of Flux, it was impossible to tie everything up in a nice, neat way that made sense and was easy to watch and understand and allowed things to breathe and things to have a rightful conclusion, and they just didn't, unfortunately for me. But despite that, The Vanquishers is not going to take the place of my least favourite episode 6, and that is going to remain as Praxeus. And Praxeus is the second of the 2 episodes that I mentioned previously that I failed to finish when rewatching of late. I, again, found Praxeus a very, very, very dull watch. Again, it's because there isn't much of a threat, there isn't much intensity, there's just, again, way too big of a cast with way too many characters that are just inconsequential to the story. It's another Chibnall trope where he adds way too many people in and they just don't get enough time to breathe or develop and have enough time or enough character for you to actually care about them. And I think if you have less characters, which means they each have more screen time individually, you can give them more characteristics, you can develop them more, have more lines with them, more scenes with them, which allows you to connect with them more and care about them, so that when the story moves on and things start to get dangerous and the climax comes, you're actually invested in what's going on. But Praxeus is an example of characters who are thrown in there with no backstory, we're meant to just get on board, they're very generic, and again, I felt nothing towards them, cared very little for them, and by the time I was halfway through the story, it hadn't really gone anywhere. It was so flat and boring. Again, lots of exposition, lots of talking scenes. It lost me completely, and I didn't even finish rewatching it. So I remember the end of Praxeus being another kind of preachy, look after the environment kind of ending, which again was a very jarring one. Another example, I think, of Doctor Who trying to do the right thing, trying to push the right messages, but not making it and disguising it within the story enough. It makes it too blatant, it makes it too forceful, and I remember Praxeus and the end of the episode being very much like Orphan 55 in that respect. So I didn't enjoy this episode at all, and it is going to remain in this position. A couple that may contend with it, I think The Woman Who Lived is another episode I'm not a big fan of, same as The Almost People, and maybe The Vampires of Venice as well. But Praxeus is going to continue to have the place of my least favourite, episode 6. Episode 7 now, and we say goodbye to Flux, as of course, only 6 episodes. We now move on to seeing if any of my previous selections from the last Best Possible and Worst Possible series have changed. So, episode 7 we have The Long Game, The Idiot's Lantern, 42, Unicorn and the Wasp, Amy's Choice, A Good Man Goes to War, The Rings of Akaten, Kill the Moon, The Zygon Invasion, The Pyramid at the End of the World, Kablam, and Can You Hear Me? So, has my opinion changed, and is Can You Hear Me still my least favourite episode 7? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is. It's still my least favourite episode 7. Another episode, and I don't want to seem like I'm repeating myself, another broken record here, but once again, another very dull one, another very boring episode that didn't intrigue me or have me even remotely invested. And I thought the villains in this episode were actually really good and really creepy, and there was definitely a villain that you could do something special with in this episode. But unfortunately, once again, it was an episode that didn't pick up the pace, wasn't eventful enough, and again, was too slow, too many talking scenes. I appreciate the mental health aspect of it again, but it just slowed the episode down way too much, and it was another one that I just found incredibly boring, and I'm not going to say much more than that to avoid myself seeming very repetitive. In terms of close episodes that, you know, could be considered competition in a weird way, The Idiot's Lantern is definitely one that I don't like and I think is quite poor. 42, I've grew to have a soft spot for over time, and The Rings of Akaten is probably my biggest guilty pleasure in the whole of the modern series. So no episodes come that close, I think. It's not a bad mix, to be fair, but Can You Hear Me remains my least favourite, episode 7. Episode 8, and we currently have Father's Day, The Impossible Planet, Human Nature, Silence in the Library, The Hungry Earth, Let's Kill Hitler, Cold War, Mummy on the Orient Express, The Zygon Inversion, The Lie of the Land, The Witchfinders, and The Haunting of Villa Diodati. So currently we have Let's Kill Hitler in this position, and you won't be surprised to see that my opinion on that has not changed. Let's Kill Hitler is still my least favourite episode 8, and it's in a very, very difficult category, you could say here, because you've got Father's Day, Human Nature, Silence in the Library, Mummy on the Orient Express, The Zygon Inversion, some very strong episodes, The Haunting of Villa Diodati is another one, so there's not much in terms of competition here for Let's Kill Hitler. I think The Lie of the Land, I remember being a very iffy and Marmite kind of conclusion to what was a three-parter at the time, which I wasn't a big fan of, but is still a decent enough watch. Other than that, maybe The Hungry Earth is a bit average, but I still kind of enjoy that episode. Cold War's not bad, so Let's Kill Hitler stands out like a sore thumb to me as the weakest, and I think the reason for that is because of the massive climax and the amazing conclusion to A Good Man Goes to War. It felt very, very flat that we continued the Let's Kill Hitler, and I thought the episode was very average. I thought the Tesselector was very dull, very boring, and I think River Song really annoyed me in this. She was super flirty, super jarring, and was probably this was probably the worst episode for River Song in this. So Let's Kill Hitler was an episode that left me feeling very flat following, you know, we'd just had an incredible cliffhanger. We'd come back after a couple of months break, And this is what we got. And I thought it sort of was the beginning of the end, and the beginning of the downfall towards the end of Series 6, I would say. So Let's Kill Hitler is still my least favourite, Episode 8. Episode 9, and we have The Empty Child, The Satan Pit, Family of Blood, Forest of the Dead, Cold Blood, Night Terrors, Hide, Flatline, Sleep No More, Empress of Mars, It Takes You Away, and Ascension of the Cybermen. Currently, Sleep No More is my least favourite episode 9, and again, it's not going to be much surprise to you guys, because a lot of the episodes in my worst possible series from here on in stand out like a sore arse compared to some of the others, because this is where mostly in Doctor Who it gets good. This is where you have really good penultimate episodes leading into great finales, and if there's a poor episode in these lists, they're usually clear of the others, and Sleep No More definitely is. And it's a shame, because when I first found out that this was going to be a found footage episode, I thought this could be absolutely incredible, the potential of this working, and I still believe if they were to do another found footage episode, the potential of it working would be incredible. But unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. I don't know what it was about Sleep No More, but again, the characters I thought were very dull and very annoying, and the found footage aspect, if anything, made the episode very difficult to watch. It felt like certain scenes were cut out, it felt like you were missing certain things, and I don't think it allowed the story to flow as well as I was hoping it would, and the ending was unbelievably brief and abrupt. I thought the Sand People being a villain made from Sleep Out Your Eye, or whatever it was a very weird idea, and one I just didn't get on board with. And it's a shame with Sleep No More. It's a poor episode, and I think it's not poor in its premise, it's not poor in its idea, and what it was trying to do, it sadly just didn't work when it was executed upon, and that's a big shame. And it is surrounded by pretty good episodes. I think, if anything, Night Terrors and Empress of Mars are two that come quite close in terms of them being very average and very mediocre, but then you sat amongst The Satan Pit, The Empty Child, Family of Blood, Forest of the Dead, you've got Flatline in there as well as Ascension of the Cybermen. All episodes I think are pretty strong. So yeah, Sleep No More has no competition in this category at the moment, and still is my least favourite, episode 9. Episode 10, and we have The Doctor Dances, Love and Monsters, Blink, Midnight, Vincent and the Doctor, The Girl Who Waited, Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, In the Forest of the Night, Face the Raven, The Eaters of Light, The Battle of Rice and Beans, and The Timeless Children. Now, episode 10, I feel like you either have an absolute worldie of an episode or an absolute stinker. You look at The Doctor Dances, Blink, Midnight, Vincent and the Doctor, even The Girl Who Waited and Face the Raven, and think, wow, they're incredible. Then you've got Love and Monsters, and Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, In the Forest of the Night, The Eaters of Light, and The Battle of Rice and Beans. And they are all, well, not. They're all very dull, very average, and in some cases very, very bad. And I think currently In the Forest of the Night is the current incumbent of this episode in this position, and it's lucky that it still remains in that position, because I was very close to replacing it with the series finale of The Battle of Rice and Beans, the Series 11 finale. Because, in all seriousness, The Battle of Ranskarav Kolos was one of the most disappointing finales I've ever known. I've never known a finale to a series of Doctor Who be so contained with so little at stake and feel so flat and be so dull, and Tim Shaw was never a formidable enough villain for me to warrant a series finale. I wouldn't even think he's strong enough to warrant a two-parter dedicated to him, never mind him return and be the big villain of a Doctor's first series. But he was, and he was defeated very, very poorly in terms of the fact that Ryan and Graham shot him in the leg and threw him in a cupboard. That was literally it. It was a very, very flat and anticlimactic and disappointing end to the series, and it summed up Series 11 for me with how that finale ended. But it's not quite as bad as In the Forest of the Night, which is a joke of an episode. It has absolutely no story to it, and if you literally take out everything that happened, the Doctor, the kids, Christ them kids, Danny, the random tiger or lion or whatever it was, you've got Clara in there as well, take all that out, it doesn't make a single solitary difference. They literally did nothing. You look back to that episode, they went out, they explored the forest, and that was it. They did nothing more, nothing less. That forest would have taken over the earth and then eventually would have dissipated, and that would have been that. It caused no havoc, no issue, no threat. They literally could have just sat back in the TARDIS and put their feet up and waited for the trees and everything to disappear and the solar flare to pass and Earth to be fine. And that it is the definition of a pointless episode of Doctor Who. So you'd think at least the bits in between would be good, but they weren't. The kids were so irritating and so bad, and just literally some of the worst child acting I think I've ever seen. The Danny and Clara stuff was really, it was just forced and added nothing to the episode, and yeah, it was just really dull and pretty pointless. And the end scene sort of sums it up when she goes back to the house and Annabelle is just hidden in a hedge. What the flipping hell was all that about? Honestly, in the Forest of the Night, I don't know what they thought when they written this episode, because there seems to be so much missing to it. But regardless, it is what it is. It is still my least favourite episode 10, and it will take something absolutely horrific to beat it. Episode 11 now, and this is without doubt the most difficult category of this whole list, because you have got pretty much a list of worldies from start to finish. You know, Boomtown I love. I think it's a lovely little episode. Fear Her we'll get to. Utopia, Turn Left, The Lodger is a fun enough watch. I like the God Complex. I think the Crimson Horror is possibly one of the only few average episodes in this list. I think Dark Water is a very good start to it. In the end, a disappointing finale before you have Heaven Sent, which is incredible, and World Enough in Time, which is, again, very good. So, looking at this, you've got only maybe 2 episodes or 3 episodes to choose from, and they're not even that bad. You know, the Crimson Horror isn't one of my favourites, but it's not bad. The God Complex, like I said, I think is good, and even The Lodger, it's not bad. It's okay. So Fear Her has been the episode that I think has held this position for as long as I've had the worst possible series, since 2014 I think it was, and it's going to stay there because I just can't see this ever changing. You know, it's in such a difficult category, such a difficult group, and it is the only episode that I think stands out to being not even bad, because it's not bad, it's just not as good as the others. And I guess the Scribble Creature, it's a bit childish, it's a bit CBeebies, I don't know really, it doesn't feel like much of a threat, and it's kind of contained into one street, which doesn't give the episode much scale, but that's not a bad thing either. It's an okay little episode, and I feel bad for putting it in there, but yeah, this is a tough category, with episodes that I wouldn't consider poor across the board really, so it is with regret that I put Fear Her back into the position of my least favourite, episode 11. Episode 12, and this is where the finales start and things really get good. You've got Bad Wolf, Army of Ghosts, The Sound of Drums, The Stolen Earth, The Pandorica Opens, Closing Time, Nightmare in Silver, Death in Heaven, Hellbent, and The Doctor Falls. Now again, a very good group, and I think there's probably once again 3 standouts that you could consider the weakest. I think all of the Russell finale opening parts are all very good. I think the Pandorica Opens is fantastic. Death in Heaven's disappointing, but not too bad. And The Doctor Falls is a very good finale, I think. I really love it. So you're looking at Closing Time, Nightmare in Silver, and of course, Hellbent. And as much as I think Closing Time was a stupid excuse for a Sidemen appearance and a truly bad episode, and Nightmare in Silver, again, another pretty bad episode, you guys know that I have never and never will like Hellbent. And I'm infamous for my Hellbent rants. And I'm not going to get too deep into it because you guys have heard me rant about Hellbent a million times before, but it took a giant dump on the Series 9 arc and the 2 episodes that preceded it, in terms of Face the Raven giving Clara a character who should have left a long time earlier, and at the time I thought there's no way they can give her a good enough exit because she just won't go away. They did, in Face the Raven, a beautifully heartbreaking and impactful end to her character, which brought tears to my eyes. That's something I never thought would happen. You then have Heaven Sent, which is a beautifully unique character piece, which brought back Gallifrey, and Hellbent takes a dump on both of them things. For the first 20 minutes, it's all great, it's all fine, but then it chooses to take the idea of Gallifrey, which has, they used Heaven Sent to bring back Gallifrey in such a great way. The Doctor finally, 4.5 billion years for God's sake, he tries his hardest to get home, and they just don't care about Gallifrey. They throw it away in a matter of moments, and more so, that unbelievable exit for Clara Oswald, of course, gets completely retconned and reversed, just so she can leave in the worst looking CGI diner in the history of eternity with me. It just... How they thought that was a better ending than Face the Raven to Clara's character, I do not know. And it makes her character even more insufferable in terms of her exit. She wasn't a bad character. I don't mind Clara, in all honesty. But it's the fact that she just wouldn't ever leave. She should have left in Death in Heaven. She should have left in Last Christmas. She should have left in Face the Raven. And by the end, you're forcing her out of the door. So to see her come back again in Hellbent, and it be... again, the Clara show, when it should have been the Doctor, the Time Lords, Rassilon, that's what the story should have been about, but for it to centre around Clara again just made me groan so much. She become the centrepiece, she become the whole episode once again, and the whole her forgetting the Doctor thing at the end was just a rehash of Series 4 with Donna, in my opinion, and the hybrid. The hybrid, it never got a conclusion. We still don't know what it was, the whole build-up to it, and Moffat couldn't properly wrap it up, to the point to which we still have no idea what the hybrid was. That was a really, really poor end to that story arc. So Hellbent didn't tie up the loose ends that were there to be tied up, and it took some of the previous tied up loose ends, untied them, and then shat all over them, and then set them on fire. Then pissed on the fire, and then put them in the bin. So Hellbent, as you can establish, is still my least favourite, episode 12. Episode 13 now, and this is where we have a very small selection, because of course, only the first 7 series of Modern Who had a 13th episode. So, we're looking at Parting of the Ways, Doomsday, Last of the Time Lords, Journey's End, The Big Bang, The Wedding of River Song, and The Name of the Doctor. Again, this is another tough category, with only, I wouldn't even say 2 options that stand out, because out of them all, The Big Bang, I'm not a big fan of. I think it is a little bit too messy and a little bit too timey-wimey for me personally, but I still enjoy watching it. I still think it's got a lot of great scenes and a lot of good stuff to offer, and I really, really like the wedding scenes at the end with the Doctor and Amy and River and everything. I think it's lovely stuff, even though I think it's a bit of a messy end to Series 5. The rest are all amazing, so of course The Wedding of River Song stands out like a very, very sore ass, and it's going to remain there, because although my feelings have sort of sombered on The Wedding of River Song over time, it still isn't a satisfactory conclusion to Series 6 in my opinion. I mentioned it earlier with Let's Kill Hitler, but it was the start of the downfall to Series 6, a series which had so much potential, was trying to do something really, really clever, and just kind of lost its way. And in the end, in The Wedding of River Song, Moffat was trying his desperate hardest to wrap things up and just couldn't quite nail it and couldn't quite get it right. So it's always an episode that I figure is a little bit of a letdown, with the Doctor being the Tesselector and the Doctor getting married to River and all that sort of stuff. It's just, yeah, I found it a very flat, disappointing finale, unfortunately for me. And although my feelings have sombered on it over time, even if I wasn't as strongly, I guess I didn't as strongly dislike The Wedding of River Song as I have before, when you compare it to some of the other episodes, it is still quite simply the weakest of the lot, and you can tell it stands out and is the worst episode 13. Now then, on to the festive specials, as we are now calling it, with the other specials in a separate category. So we have 16 festive specials to choose from, and they are as follows: A Christmas Invasion, The Runaway Bride, Voyage of the Damned, The Next Doctor, The End of Time, A Christmas Carol, The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe, The Snowmen, The Time of the Doctor, Last Christmas, The Husbands of River Song, The Return of Dr. Mysterio, Twice Upon a Time, Resolution, Revolution of the Daleks, and Eve of the Daleks, which is a new addition to this section. So, everyone knows, and I mentioned this in the best possible series, I split these into sections. Now, I always have really loved the RTD Christmas specials for how grounded they are, how earthbound they are, and that Christmas isn't as prominent as it is in the Moffat Christmas specials. And this is just personal preference, right? It's completely subjective. It depends on what you want from a Christmas special. Some fans love it to be Christmas heavy, to be even based on a Christmas novel like A Christmas Carol, and you've got the Doctor within the wardrobe. I mean, in the Snowmen, literally, you've got snowmen as villains, and in Last Christmas, you've got Santa Claus. So, some people prefer a lot more of them kind of on-the-nose Christmas specials. For me, I've always preferred the more down-to-earth, modern-day ones, with Christmas playing a bit of a part, or New Year's playing a bit of a part, but the story is still pretty much a normal Doctor Who story, and that covers both the RTD and the Chris Chibnall specials, which I thought were also very, very good. So we've nailed it down to the Moffat Christmas specials, and I currently had the return of Dr. Mysterio as my least favourite Christmas special, and as much as I don't like the Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe, as much as I don't like Last Christmas that much, I think it's going to remain there as my least favourite Christmas or festive special. Because for me, the return of Dr. Mysterio is the only one that doesn't feel like Doctor Who at all. I mean, the others do push the boat in terms of Christmas and make it very Christmas heavy, which can make it a bit cringy and make it feel less like Doctor Who and more like a Christmas film, which isn't a bad thing. But the return of Dr. Mysterio doesn't do either. It is literally a superhero entering the world of Doctor Who, and although you can, withstand and limit your disbelief in Doctor Who to a point, because it is a fictional show about a man who travels in a small police box, you can, of course, set your beliefs back to a point to which things seem realistic or unrealistic in Doctor Who, but for me, having a superhero in it was a step too far, and I just think it's a really silly story. It's one I just can't get engaged in at all, because it just doesn't feel like Doctor Who for me. It feels like a parody or a rip-off, or I don't know, it just feels like a parody of Doctor Who. That's the only way I can describe it, and stands out in terms of a Christmas special that doesn't utilise Christmas well, and just doesn't feel like an episode of Doctor Who for me. And having had a year's gap after the Husbands of River Song, to get that episode was also something that made it even more disappointing. So yeah, Return of Dr. Mysterio is still my least favourite festive special. And finally, in terms of other specials, we now have a new category with 5 episodes in it. So we have Planet of the Dead, The Waters of Mars, The Day of the Doctor, Legend of the Sea Devils, and The Power of the Doctor. Once again, you've got some big names in here. The Waters of Mars, my favourite episode of all time. Day of the Doctor is the 50th, and The Power of the Doctor was, well, kind of a 60th, but of course it was more of a regeneration story with a ton of Doctors in it, which was great. So it's between Planet of the Dead and Legend of the Sea Devils. And shoot me, but I do not understand the hate for Planet of the Dead. I love that episode. I think it's a lovely little episode. I think, yes, it's surrounded by very good episodes, but I love it. I love this idea of this bus that gets lost in the middle of a desert that goes through a wormhole. I think Malcolm's character is brilliant because Lee Evans is my favourite comedian. It also has a great ending. It sets up End of Time with the 4 knocks. I don't get why it gets so much hate. I really do like Planet of the Dead. I think it's a lovely little episode. So it leaves one, and that, of course, is Legend of the Sea Devils, which was awful. Let's be honest. Rumours were that they weren't even going to make this episode. Chibnall wasn't exactly planning on having an episode at that time of year, but the BBC insisted on them putting out something, and they flung together Legend of the Sea Devils. And when I say flung together, that's because it feels like it very much was. It was an episode that had CGI that looked horrific. The editing was terrible. It looked like there were scenes missing. One minute you had the Doctor and Naz in one place, then they'd suddenly magically be in another with no explanation. It just felt so disjointed and so badly put together. There were also scenes that made no sense, with the Doctor having an absolute go at somebody for attacking a sea devil, and then scenes later you see Dan literally chopping down sea devils for fun with a sword. It just, again, the morality of this Doctor makes no sense, and it seems to be the characters do what the plot requires them to at that certain point, rather than the other way around. The characters should be, having an effect on the plot and what happens around them rather than the plot dictating what the characters do and what is convenient for the plot at that moment. And yeah, Legend of the Sea Devils was a terrible episode and an utter waste of the Sea Devils' return, and it's a shame, really, that after all this time, they returned in an episode that was as bad as this one. So, it's not got much competition, it's pretty much out there on its own, but yeah, the worst special of the 5 that we now have in this category is undoubtedly Legend of the Sea Devils. So guys, there is my worst possible series 2022, so let's run through it before I collapse. New Earth, dinosaurs on a spaceship, Once Upon Time, arachnids in the UK, The Saranga Conundrum, Praxeus, Can You Hear Me, Let's Kill Hitler, Sleep No More, In the Forest of the Night, Fear Her, Hellbent, The Wedding of River Song, The Return of Dr. Mysterio, and Legend of the Sea Devils. So guys, there it is. The worst possible series, 2022. Now, if you ever want to put yourself through actual hell, then test yourself to put yourself through your worst possible series. You never know, you might do it and you might find some solace with some of the episodes. You might realise some love for some episodes, or you might just drive yourself completely insane and never want to watch Doctor Who again. I hope it's not the latter. But that is my worst possible series, guys. If you've enjoyed it, hit the like button, do subscribe for much more Doctor Who content. Hit the bell as well so you never miss when we do upload. And like I said in the last video, comment below your worst possible series. It's always fun to compare which episodes we like, dislike, and see what your worst possible series is like compared to someone else's. It's very rare you see 2 people with the same best and worst possible series. That's why I adore this concept and this idea. But yeah, leave yours in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching once again. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.